Today we'll be talking about urea cycle. It's also called ornithine cycle, right?
Good morning, sir.
Morning. So this is urea cycle. Now, urea cycle is basically performed so that nitrogenous compounds that are formed from your amino acids, nitrogen which is converted from of your nitrogen of your amino acid will be converted into ammonia. This can be toxic to your body. Okay, as such, ammonia, if it is freely flowing in your body, it can be toxic. To avoid that, to get it detoxified, urea is formed. Okay, it is converted into urea and it is detoxified. Mainly urea formation occurs in the liver. There will be other enzymes that are responsible for urea formation that will be present in other cells, but liver is essential for the formation of urea. See, as a rule of thumb, you can take that urea cycle mainly occurs in your liver. Now, urea has two amino groups. Okay, the formula of urea is NH2CO NH2. So the two amino groups get your urea gets two amino groups from two different amino acids. All right, one it will get from aspartate and another from arginine. You'll understand in a bit how it will happen. So now, coming to the reactions that follow in the urea cycle, initially in the mitochondria of your hepatocyte, what happens is a compound called carbamoyl phosphate is formed. Okay, this in the what you call pinkish red box that you can see on the top left, the first compound that is formed by the combination of ammonia and carbon dioxide using the enzyme carbamoyl phosphate synthetase. You will get something called carbamoyl phosphate. All right, this in turn, this is a rate limiting step. Now carbamoyl phosphate synthetase, वहाँ पर star लिखा हुआ है, right? If you can see the star on the bottom left, you can read that the star represents a rate limiting step. It is a rate limiting step, meaning that the rate of the reaction, okay, the rate of urea cycle altogether, or the rate of the reaction just from carbon dioxide to carbon dioxide and ammonia to carbamoyl phosphate, that depends on the enzyme, because you have something called N-acetyl glutamate. It is not mentioned in this, but N-acetyl glutamate is a stimulator of your enzyme. It acts as a cofactor. If you do not have enough amount of N-acetyl glutamate, what will happen is the reaction does not occur. Okay, if there is excessive, let's suppose there is excessive urea present in your blood, at that point of time your body will regulate urea cycle, or it will stop urea cycle, or it will slow it down. Okay, the number of urea molecules that are being formed, it will be slowed down by suppressing what you call formation of N-acetyl glutamate. If there is no N-acetyl glutamate, that first enzyme cannot work properly. Carbamoyl phosphate synthetase cannot work properly. If that enzyme is not present, you will not get carbamoyl phosphate. Now, in the scenario that everything is working normally and carbamoyl phosphate synthetase is converting ammonia and carbon dioxide into carbamoyl phosphate, this fellow will again undergo another reaction where carbamoyl phosphate will combine with ornithine. Ornithine is a very specific kind of amino acid. Okay, it is not exactly an amino acid. It is an amino acid derivative. Okay, derived amino acids mein aata wo. So it will combine with ornithine, right? If you can see this part here, one second, this part here, right? One second, I'll use a different color. Hmm. Right. This ornithine is combining with this carbamoyl phosphate to give you citrulline. Okay. In the process, what happens is the reaction takes place in your mitochondria. Ornithine will go into your mitochondria and it will combine with carbamoyl phosphate in the presence of ornithine transcarbamylase. See, carbamyl का मतलब है carbonyl में I am replacing what you call the CO with NH2. That is carbamyl group. So you an image of what carbamyl looks like. One second. to put it into perspective, this is carbonyl group. Okay, this is a keto group. From this, you can derive something called a carbamyl group. Carbamyl group will look similar to this, but it will be like this. One second, I'll show you the image. This is carbamyl group. Okay, you're replacing both the R groups with one phosphate and one vertical ammonium ion. All right, or one nitrogenous compound. यहाँ पर you end up getting carbamyl phosphate. This is carbamyl phosphate. All right. So in case you had a doubt. Now coming back to our cycle, right? Now carbamyl phosphate, as we were discussing. One second. Let me just erase these. Right. So carbamyl phosphate, as we were discussing, this fellow will combine with ornithine in the presence of ornithine transcarbamylase, and it will it will form citrulline. All right, citrulline will get out of your mitochondria. The initial reaction occurs in your mitochondria where carbamyl phosphate and ornithine are combining together. They combine together to form citrulline, and citrulline comes out of your mitochondria. This reaction in turn, see, the first step of urea cycle will be synthesis of carbamyl phosphate. That is the first step here. Carbon dioxide and ammonia forming carbamyl phosphate. The second step is ornithine combining with carbamyl phosphate to form citrulline. Right. The second step is carbamyl phosphate combining with ornithine here to form citrulline. I'm not sure whether you can see my cursor or not, but that is where it happens. Citrulline will get out of your mitochondria and it will continue the reaction where it combines with aspartate. Aspartate is the other or let's suppose aspartate is the first amino acid that will come in contact with citrulline. And what happens is, in the presence of arginosuccinate synthetase, it will end up forming arginosuccinate. All right, this combination of citrulline and aspartate using the enzyme arginosuccinate will give you arginosuccinate. यहाँ पर the second amino acid will be later on be given by arginine. Okay, you will understand a little bit. What will happen is arginosuccinate will cleave. The first thing that is happening is citrulline is combining with one amino acid aspartate in the presence of arginosuccinate synthetase to form arginosuccinate. These are all intermediate compounds. Okay, in the end what we are looking for is this urea on the bottom left. If you can see on the left side under ornithine, we want urea. The urea, the whole cycle is so that you can get urea. All right, urea, think of it like a byproduct of this reaction. Okay, this reaction is also called ornithine cycle, or it is also called Hans-Krebs cycle. In this cycle, one byproduct that you get is urea. That is why it is also called urea cycle or ornithine cycle. Main component that is participating in this is ornithine, but you get urea. That is why it is called urea cycle. So these are intermediates that you get in between. Aspartate will combine with citrulline, giving you arginosuccinate. Arginosuccinate in turn will cleave. It will break down. Okay, it will give you two different molecules in the presence of arginosuccinase, which is arginine and fumarate. So it will give you another amino acid altogether. All right, arginine, this fellow will again cleave. Okay, arginine will break down again in the presence of arginase, giving you ornithine and urea. This ornithine will continue the cycle. So another, it will combine with another carbamyl phosphate, and it will continue the reaction to form more urea if and when required. Okay, if there is a lot of urea already present, the urea cycle will slow down a little bit, and when there is lesser amount of urea that needs to be secreted, or let me put it this way, if there is a lot of ammonia present, that is when more urea will be formed. If there is less ammonia present, less urea will be formed. All right, direct correlation in that sense. I hope cycle samajh mein aaya. Okay, I'll repeat once again. The first step will be formation of carbamyl phosphate from carbon dioxide and ammonium using carbamyl phosphate synthetase. That enzyme, you are combining them and forming a synthetase enzyme where you are synthesizing carbamyl phosphate. I showed you the structure of what carbamyl phosphate looks like. Carbamyl phosphate combines with ornithine. Ornithine is a compound that freely moves into mitochondria and cytosol. What is happening in the blue box, that is in cytoplasm or in the cytosol. Okay, ornithine is able to come out and go into your mitochondria. Here, carbamyl phosphate will combine with ornithine in the mitochondria in presence of ornithine transcarbamylase, and it will form citrulline. Citrulline will get out of your mitochondria, and it will combine with an amino acid which is aspartate. Here it is getting its second amino group. The first amino group it got from the initial first step where carbon dioxide combined with ammonia. Aspartate gives it the second ammonia group. In the presence of a synthetase enzyme, arginosuccinate synthetase, it will form arginosuccinate. From here on out, there are cleaving reactions. So first cleavage of arginosuccinate occurs where you get fumarate and arginine. Then again, arginine will break down or it will cleave into urea and ornithine. Okay, it will use up a water molecule in the process, but you end up getting ornithine back and you get urea. Now this urea is excreted out of your body. The thing is that the enzyme arginase, this fellow is mostly found only in the liver. Okay, while all the rest of the enzyme of the cycle will be present in other tissues. So because of this, arginine synthesis can occur in many tissues, but formation of urea can only occur in liver. Because arginase is only present in liver, urea formation can only occur in liver. Even if you get the other enzymes in other tissues, arginase is not present in other tissues, because of which you need liver. Okay, whenever there is excessive amount of nitrogen being formed, it will be sent to liver and ultimately urea will be formed in your liver. So this is your ornithine cycle. All right, this is also called urea cycle in any case. What is the clinical significance of this? See, as I told you, nitrogenous compounds can be toxic to your body. Now, a moderately active man, average man, let's suppose, who is consuming around 300 grams of carbohydrates, 100 grams of fats, and 100 grams of protein daily. I'm taking someone average, okay? This person will roughly excrete around 16.5 grams of urea per day. All right, 95% of which is what you call excreted out of your kidneys and 5% through your feces. All right, normally your blood plasma level of urea should be around 20 to 40 mg percentage. All right, mg per dl le lo, mg percentage le lo. In some conditions, urea will increase in body, which can be hazardous. Okay, it can create a lot of havoc. So those conditions in which urea will increase in your body can be divided into, will not get into a lot of detail, but the causes can be classified into pre-renal. Now pre-renal will be something like where, let's suppose, blood fluid volume is decreased or plasma volume has decreased. Okay, so the relative quantity of urea has increased. Now for example, if I take, I'll give you an easier way to understand that. Let's suppose I take a cup of water, okay, and I add 1 teaspoon of sugar in this. Okay, 1 teaspoon of sugar. Okay, this is sugar. I add this in this, right? Now I have, let's suppose 1 teaspoon had around 50 or 15 grams of sugar. So currently, let's suppose this is around 100 ml, right? Now the concentration of this solution will be 15 grams of sugar present in 100 ml, correct? Now, if I dry this water out, if I decrease the volume of water by heating it or by some other means, let's suppose I'm heating it, I'm not decreasing the amount of sugar, I'm simply decreasing the amount of volume. So let's suppose I have made it 50 ml now. Okay, but the amount of sugar that is present, that does not change because sugar does not evaporate. Okay, meaning I have essentially doubled the concentration, right? I can put it this way, or another way of writing the same thing is I have 30 grams per 100 ml. Okay, so this is the same concept with urea. Pre-renal causes will basically indicate that the amount of blood or the plasma volume that is present or the fluid that is present in your body, that has decreased. So the relative amount of urea that is present, which was initially normal, let's suppose your body had 20 grams of urea in total. Okay, in all of the fluids of your body, let's suppose the total fluids of your body is around what you call 40 liters. Okay, in 40 liters you had 20 grams of urea. Now because of dehydration or because of whatever reason, this volume has decreased to a volume of 35 liters. Okay, that's a significant drop. 5 liters ka drop hai. What happens is the relative amount of urea that was present in your fluids, that has increased, right? Even though the concentration of urea did not increase, its relative amount, relative to the amount of fluid that is present in your body, it has increased. All right, those will be included in your pre-renal causes. I hope you understood the concept here, If you didn't understand, please feel free to ask me. One second.
So
Didn't understand. Acha, देखो. Let's suppose. Acha, who has a doubt? One second. Can I know your name? आकांक्षा था वो, लवली थी, who was that? Lovely. Okay. So lovely, chai पीते? You drink tea or coffee?
yes, sir.
Okay. How much sugar do you take in a
Yes.
cup of coffee or in a cup of tea? 1 teaspoon, 2 teaspoon. How much do you take?
1.
1 teaspoon. Okay. Let's suppose you're taking 1 teaspoon of sugar in 1 cup of coffee. Let's suppose that cup of coffee or that cup of tea has around 150 200 ml. उतना रहता ना, उससे ज़्यादा तो नहीं पीते generally. Okay. Let's suppose 200 300 ml पी रहे आप. Okay. एक बार में tea or coffee. So I have a cup like this. And let's suppose I have some tea which is around 300 ml. Okay, in this I have 1 teaspoon of sugar. All right, before drinking this, let's suppose you this becomes what you call colder. You just put the cup aside and you busy doing some other thing, and you come back to your cup of coffee to just to find it is cold. So you want to reheat it back. Now once you reheat it back, obviously there will come a point, or sometimes what will happen is you tend to overheat the coffee where it will evaporate a little bit. Okay, that happens. Now let's suppose if you pour it back into your cup of coffee, it has 250 ml instead of 300 ml. What will happen to the taste of that coffee? Will it become sweeter or will it remain the same?
It will be sweeter.
It will be sweeter because मैं पानी कम कर दिया. Right? The amount of sugar I have not changed, but the relative amount of sugar that is present with respect to water. I had one ratio, 1 teaspoon of sugar to 300 ml. I like this much ratio. Okay, I have essentially increased the ratio in a way that in the favor of sugar, meaning relative to the amount of fluid or the relative to the amount of water or milk or whatever you're using, the amount of sugar has increased, meaning the solution has become sweeter. The same thing happens with urea. Okay, if I have a certain amount of fluid in my body, so if I consider my body as a huge jug and I have around 40 liters of fluid, okay, I'm not just talking about blood, altogether all around your body around 40 liters of fluid is present. Let's suppose in this you have 20 mg of urea. Okay, let's suppose this is normal, and because of dehydration or because of volume loss or because of whatever reason, let's suppose the volume of fluid in your body decreases. This has become 35 liters now. Okay, so initially it was 40 liters, now it has become 35 liters. All right, and urea content is the same, but what will happen to its relative concentration? Increases, no? The same way as sugar increased, मतलब मिठास बढ़ गई थी. Even though I did not change the amount of sugar that is present in that cup, it has become sweeter because the concentration of sugar relative to the amount of fluid has increased. The same way, concentration of urea relative to the amount of fluid present in your body increases. Those will be included in pre-renal causes. It does not have anything related to your kidney, meaning your kidney is not the problem here, but some other condition that is causing fluctuation in your body fluid, because of which relative amount of urea is increasing. See, urea goes hand in hand in kidneys because 95% of urea is excreted out of kidneys. So there is a very strong correlation that if there is increased amount of urea, it can be because of a problem in kidneys. But there is a chance that without a problem in kidneys as well, there can be increase in urea. Those will be included in pre-renal causes. I hope that cleared your doubt.
Yes, sir.
Anyone else? समझ में आप लोगों को? Okay, take that as yes. Okay, that is the first one. Then you have
Yes,
renal
sir.
causes. Then you have renal causes. One second. Now, renal causes are pretty much straightforward. If someone has a kidney disease or a renal disorder, because of which urea is not being excreted properly, it will start getting accumulated in your body. That is how the blood urea level or the body's urea level will go up. Okay. Then you have, this is a problem directly in the kidneys itself. Then you have post-renal causes. this is an obstruction. So it is not a problem in your kidneys per se, it is a problem in your urinary tract. Okay, because of a blockage, calculi, whatever you call it, because of an obstruction, urea is not being excreted out of your body, because of which blood urea level increases. Then you have something called uremia, the last condition, which is uremia. Once again, yeah. Okay, in some textbook it will be written as uremia, means the same. Now uremia is a condition in which, because of a disease, like disease of your body, it might be renal, it might not be renal, because of a diseased condition, the blood urea level goes up over 50 mg percentage in your blood. Okay, so a significant spike in urea, and it will be acute, so very quick rise in urea occurs. That is uremia, a very quick rise in urea levels in your blood. uh, this can be specifically because it is suppressing excretion of urea, or it can be blockage, or it can be multiple reasons where one particular disease is causing increase in what do you call, the amount of urea in blood. So this is related to pathological conditions. Okay, pathological conditions that will directly increase the amount of urea in your blood. All right, so these are the four ways you can categorize what you call causes an increase in blood urea. All right, so this was about urea cycle. We'll get into uric acid cycle now. So there is something called uric acid that is a little much more simpler actually. All right, so uric acid is something that is formed in your body, but 95% of it, or almost 90% of it, is reabsorbed back. Depending on the pH of your blood, uric acid levels will fluctuate. If let's suppose the what do you call pH of your blood, how much should be a pH of your blood, by the way? What is the normal pH of your blood?
6 to 8, son.
6 to 8. You're close. Anyone else?
7.
7.4.
Yep,
7.
7.4. 7.4. Okay, it will fluctuate between 7.2 to 7.4. All right, here and there in some people you will see 7.1 as well, but generally 7.4 can nazdik rehta. All right, now the pH in your blood is slightly basic, right? Just fraction में basic है. Anything over 7 is basic, so slightly basic रहता है आपका blood. Not truly acidic, but not truly basic as well. So that is the pH of it. It is closer to neutral than it is to basic. Now, whenever your pH increases over 7.4, or let's suppose because of whatever reason, the pH of your blood goes all the way up to 7.6, 7.8, the amount of uric acid that is being retained, see, it is an acid. Any acid will have the property of decreasing pH. Okay, it will have a lower pH, less than 7. So if I retain more amount of uric acid inside my body, meaning if uric acid level increases in my blood, the pH of the blood will go down, right? Now because of whatever reason, let's suppose any pathological condition, or it can be whatever it is, pH of the blood is increasing up to 7.8. What will happen is automatically your kidneys will decrease the excretion of uric acid, or to put it another way, it will increase the reabsorption of uric acid. I'm sure आप लोगों को kidneys and filtration हो गया ना, so you must have read that in what you call the distal part of your DCT के पास, you will have uric acid being reabsorbed inside. If I remember correctly, the DCT में uric acid will be reabsorbed. Almost 90% of uric acid that is excreted out of your body will be reabsorbed. Here, if a condition occurs where what do you call blood pH is increasing, more amount of uric acid will be reabsorbed back. So more than 90 will be reabsorbed back, just to stabilize the blood pH. Once it is stabilized, it will be gone back. Okay, again 90% of only what do you call 10% of it will be excreted out, and 90% will be reabsorbed. That is the significance of uric acid. It is very helpful in maintaining the pH of your body fluids, specifically your blood. Now, how uric acid is formed is RNA and DNA, whenever they are breaking down, whenever a cell dies or whenever RNA and DNA is broken down, you get purines. Now, we have studied in RNA and DNA, you had a chapter called RNA and DNA about purines and pyrimidines, right? Adenosine monophosphate, guanosine triphosphate, all of that. One second, just to refresh your memory. I have one image of, yeah. So these are nucleotides, right? Purines and pyrimidines are nucleotides. We are specifically talking about purines here. So adenosine and adenine and guanine are the main ones that will come into picture. So ATP will be adenosine triphosphate, where that NH2 group is present. If you remove the NH2 and add NH2 on the meta group position, and you add oxygen on the para position, you will get GTP, all right, ortho beta para, if you remember. Okay, if you want to get into the chemistry of it, but this will be the basic difference. If you want to, pyrimidines will look like that and purines will look like this. This is a 9 ring structure, that is a 6 ring structure. So purines को जब मैं break down करता हूँ, or when I break down RNA and DNA specifically, I will get purines. From purines, I can break down purines further into hypoxanthines. Okay, xanthine products, hypoxanthine products. Hypoxanthine products will undergo what you call oxidation using xanthine oxidase to form xanthines, and xanthines in turn will undergo oxidation again to form uric acid. Uric acid will be some of it will be excreted out, rest of it will be what you call filtered, and it will be reabsorbed into your tubular fluid, where what you call it will be responsible for other activity. We'll not get into the details of uric acid, but sometimes what happens is there can be a condition where excessive amount of uric acid is being reabsorbed, or less amount of uric acid is being excreted out. Okay, both of them can occur. In that condition, a disease called gout can occur. Okay, gout or hyperuricemia or deposits of urate crystal. What happens is this fellow will start depositing inside your joints, and specifically if we talk about a disease like gout, it is an inflammatory disease in which monosodium urate crystals will get deposited in the joints, and those joints will become red hot and tender, and they will swell. Okay, there'll be a proper inflammatory reaction. आप लोगों ने कभी पिंपल देखे? I'm sure you guys are like close to teenage, no? You must have gone through what you call a phase where you had pimples. At least you might have seen someone who had pimples. So if you see pimple, it will be red, and sometimes you will feel a little bit of warmth. It will be tender to touch, and it will be swollen. All right, think of that similar to that, but in your what do you call joints. Specifically, this gout occurs in your large toe, okay, in the big toe. So wo joint mein hota, and this swelling will go on for hours. This is specifically called a gouty attack. All right, this is an inflammatory problem where the patient will be in a lot of pain. They'll not be able to walk and all because of this. This is specifically because uric acid is being accumulated. Excessive amount of uric acid is being accumulated in your body. Uh, you can treat this by giving a few drugs, something like allopurinol. See, ultimately what will happen is if more and more amount of uric acid starts getting accumulated in your joints, over time it will start destroying your joint. Okay, it will destroy the architecture of your joint, and it will lead to arthritis. So that is the consequence of gout. If not controlled in time, gout can lead to arthritis. So that is why you need to give a few drugs to control this. One particular drug is allopurinol, which is given to what you call treat gout. You can also give probenecid. There are other drugs as well. We'll not get into drugs, but there are some ways through which you can treat gout. Right. So you had a little bit of gout in your portion. That is about gout. Small introduction. All right. So we'll stop the class here. Someone is coming now. Okay.